it's Helen from Journal with Purpose and welcome to my latest video. Today I'm going to be creating a spread in my Traveller's Notebook insert, and I've been asked by a few people to do some tutorials from inside my book, which I'm extremely happy to do. So I thought I would do some reflective journaling today. And on page 59, I'm going to recreate this layout 45. And you'll see that some of these are in a standard size Traveller's Notebook format and some are in A5, but you could definitely kind of switch things around a little bit and just use whatever journal you have. And also, if you're looking for ideas of things to write about with reflective journaling, there's lots of writing prompts here, so you could have a look through. So you've got things like, what do you spend lots of time thinking about? What's your favourite daydream? What do you value most in life? And I think one of the things that I want to tackle in my journal today is how many of your limitations are real or are they self-imposed? Because that's something I think about a lot, because I know I put limits on some of the things I do. So I just want to explore that a bit in my journal today. So I'm going to guide you through some of the design bits on this, how I tackle a journal page when I first open it up and see those white pages, which I know can be kind of quite fearful to look at. So I would usually start with a focal point. So I'm going to start off with sketching the rows. Also, one of the first things I nearly always do is put some form of washi tape or a really easy design on my page, because that's something I know I can do straight away. Put some washi tape down or do a little bit of stamping, and already it's going to make that page look less intimidating. So I'm going to break this one down. If you've got a copy of the book and there's any of the pages in there that you particularly like me to see me recreate, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm going to work through a series of these anyway over the coming months, but you can always just leave me a comment down below saying you'd like to see how I created any of the particular pages. So the insert I'm going to be working in, so I've got a Vintage Light Traveller's Notebook cover from Start Bay Notebooks. And in here I keep my daily journal, where I write down a few thoughts every single day, and then a little bit of reflective journaling on the right hand side. And then behind that I have my plain Traveller's Notebook insert, which is what I'll be working in today. And this has Tomo River paper in it, which handles quite a lot of mediums really well. So even with lots of watercolour, it is going to make the paper go wrinkly when you're working on it, and it doesn't react in the same way as normal watercolour would, normal watercolour paper. Of course, I love the wrinkles, but actually by the time I've written on this side, quite a lot of that is going to smooth the paper out anyway. I've been asked questions before about which clips I use, and I use these binder clips, which are Tools to Live by brand, which helps just to keep your journal flat when you're working on it. And I also have, I think it's Traveller's Company brand. So I have an underlay board there. I think they're often called pencil boards, which if I pop underneath is going to make it a nice flat surface to work on, particularly where I've used things like wax seals that are quite bumpy. That's going to help give me a flat surface to work on. So yeah, if you already have a copy of the book, it's layout 45 on page 59 that I'm going to be creating, so you can create along with me, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I'm going to start off by adding some of the brown classic-y grid tape along the left-hand page. And this tape came from London Gifties, and because it's got a paper backing, it means that if I have any spare pieces, I can always tuck them inside the pocket of my journal, ready to use at a later date. This is a really wide tape, so I'm going to tear it in half all the way along the middle. And this tape to me looks a little bit like a brick wall, and I thought that that would be really nice to add to my page and tie in with the flower that I'll be adding later. Now that the tape is added, I'm going to move on to adding the flower onto my right hand page. And I know that I want this to be quite large because I want it to be the main focal point of these spreads. And I'm going to start off by sketching this out in pencil. When I'm sketching a flower onto my journal pages, I tend to use a photo as reference, so that can be either one I've taken myself or one online. And then I look at the overall shape of the flower and then the breakdown of some of the individual petals. But I'm never too worried about trying to create something precise on my journals, just something that I really like the look of. Now I'm happy that I've got the basic shape of the flower down in pencil. I'm going to start inking it in. And for this I'm using a Sakura Pigma Micron pen in a size 1. And this has waterproof ink in it, which will be perfect because I'm going to be adding lots of watercolour over the top. The creative side of journaling really appeals to me because it just seems to be that signal to my brain that I can switch off from doing other work and any distractions that might be around me and just concentrate on what's appearing on my page. And that puts me in a much better frame of mind to start adding all of my journal writing and reflecting on things that have been happening. Once my sketch is finished, I erase all of the pencil lines and I'm then going to start mixing up some watercolour paint. This palette comes from London Gifties, but any type of watercolour or even using pencils or pens would be fine. And I'm going to be using 2 different size watercolour brushes in a 4 and an 8, and they're both from Escoda. So I take a quick look at my colour swatch chart. I'm then going to pick up the paints that I want to mix. To get ready for my painting, I'm going to mix up 2 different shades of pink for the flower and also a green. I didn't have quite the colours that I was looking for, so I've blended a couple of different shades together because I wanted one darker and one lighter pink. I find it really helpful to have the colours mixed up in advance that I want to use in my journal, so that if I want any of the colours to run together while they're still wet, I don't have to worry about working too quickly and then mixing up new colours. I'm starting off by adding the lighter shade of pink all over the flower. So I've got that as my base layer, and as you can see, the Tomoe River paper does go a little bit crinkly in places and it causes the paint to pool, but I really like that because it adds some kind of natural variation to the tones of your paint. Once I've got that first layer of pink down, I'm going to start dipping my paintbrush into the much deeper shade and just dropping it in various places around the flower. And this will run into the lighter shade and hopefully give a really nice kind of natural effect to the petals. I quickly dried this off using a heat tool, and I'm now going to use my smaller size watercolour brush to go back and add another layer of that deeper pink into just some specific places, and I can now control where it's going because the first layer of paint is completely dry. Now that I'm happy with how my flower is looking, I'm going to move on to adding the green watercolour paint to my leaves and stem. And again for this I'm using the smaller size 4 watercolour brush. And I play around with how much paint I add on each section of the leaf, again to give that natural variation. One of my favourite things to do is use a little of the leftover paint to add some splashes over my journal pages. And partly I just think it looks really pretty, but it can also help to tie your whole spread in together because you've got a little bit of the hint of that colour on both pages. Another thing that I like to do with excess paint is use it inside my junk journal. So I'm looking for a background page that I think could handle a little bit of watercolour. And I'm just going to simply add some squares of the different coloured paints all around the outside of this junk journal page. It's a really lovely way to add some colour to another journal that I'm working in and also use up some of that leftover paint. Quite a lot of my junk journal pages end up having paint on them, either of swatches like this or leaves or flowers, and that's nearly always because I've had some paint left over from something else that I've been creating in my journal. I'm now going to use my black Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen with a firm nib to add a dashed border all the way around the outside of my pages. I often add borders either by rubbing ink along the edge or doing different patterns. Again, I think it's just a really nice way of tying both of those pages into one spread. I'm now going to use that same pen to add the date to the top of my left-hand page. And if you're new to brush lettering and looking for a good starter pen, this is one that I recommend all the time. The next thing that I'm going to do is add some stamping to my page, and I have this tin of travel themed stamps and one that I really like the look of with these kind of postmarks on it. So I'm going to use some black StazOn ink and add 2 stamped images onto the left hand page. Because at the moment the right hand page looks quite a lot heavier in detail than the left. Just adding some bold stamped images can really help to balance it out. I'm now going to add a quote, And it reads, "An obstacle is often a stepping stone." Because I was looking up quotes that were related to limitations and things that we find hard to overcome. And that quote seemed just right for me and the sorts of things that I was starting to think about when I was considering my own limitations. I add quotes to lots of my journal pages, and I really like them because it helps to set my mind in a certain way of thinking, but also when I'm looking back through my journal pages, just from reading the quote alone, I can often be quickly reminded of what these journal pages are all about. I'm now going to move on to adding my journal writing, and for this I'm using a TWSBI 580 AL fountain pen. I'm using these journal pages to reflect on that journal prompt that I mentioned right at the beginning. So I'm thinking about the limitations that I have, either self-imposed or external. So I'm writing down what I think those are and where they've come from, but I also then use my pages to think about how I might be able to overcome them. Especially the kinds of limitations which are self-imposed, which for me often comes from lack of confidence in some of the things that I'd really like to do. So I'm going to use these pages to try and come up with some ideas of things that I could do to help myself move forwards. And my journal writing is often in two halves like that. One where I reflect on something that might be worrying me or causing me problems, and then the other half of the journal page starting to try and think about solutions and right way forwards for me. If you sometimes struggle for ideas for things to write about in your journals, then I think prompts can be really helpful. And there's lots of them in my book, so I'd recommend just flicking through to any of the chapters, having a read of a few of the prompts and just finding one that really speaks to you at the moment, and then use your journal page to tackle that topic. I really hope you've enjoyed seeing how I created these journal pages and hearing about the sorts of things that I write about. If you've got any questions or comments, then as always, please do leave them down below. And if you do recreate this or any of the journal pages from inside my book, please do tag me in on Instagram. I'd absolutely love to see them. So thank you ever so much for watching, and as always I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's joined me over on Patreon. I really hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you're doing okay. I look forward to speaking with you really soon in my next one.